Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to Read Becca. It's time once again for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit-chat. So this week in reading was a very good one. I finished 3 things and I really enjoyed all 3, but they are kind of all at very opposite ends of the reading spectrum, and I like them for really different reasons. So let's dive right into those books. Let's start with the one I don't have physically on hand because I listened to it on audio from Libby. And that was Millicent Quibb's School for Etiquette and Mad Science, I think. It's a very long title and very silly, by Kate McKinnon. Yes, that Kate McKinnon. And she narrated the audio. So it was an absolute delight and so well performed, impeccable. But this was extremely silly middle grade fantasy, I would say. It's very unhinged and it was great at every turn, so entertaining. So at the most basic, the plot here is following 3 little girls who are not the most well-behaved. They're very curious and they don't fall in line. And they kind of are very independent for little girls of their time period. It is somewhat historical, but it seems whimsical and kind of made up a little bit. And they keep getting kicked out of these etiquette schools. So when they're kicked out of the last one in the area, their guardians decide they're going to be sent away, until they get a mysterious letter inviting them to a new etiquette school. And that etiquette school is run secretly by Millicent Quibb. Millicent Quibb is a mad scientist and pariah in the local area. So no one knows that it's run by Millicent Quibb and that these 3 girls are the only students being invited. And I feel that piece, it was never really filled in why exactly Millicent Quibb is going after these 3 girls specifically to welcome them into her school, but it works. You don't need an explanation. I don't think a child reading this would particularly care, but that was kind of sticking in my mind. Why did she specifically reach out? But so Millicent Quibb, as I mentioned, is a pariah in the area, to the point that her name is used as kind of a derogatory term, like you're being such a Millicent Quibb. But the girls find such an affinity for her. Initially, there's some trepidation, but mad science, as it turns out, kind of works for them. And all 4 of them together wind up on a wild adventure that involves a Kurgalax, which is a rock-eating worm of some sort, and some nefarious plots, certainly. So it was great, very silly, very goofy, very over the top. And I had a fantastic time with it, especially on the audio. I would say, for me, this felt very akin to Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events in many ways, but even more silly and goofy. It certainly has that feel. The kids are sort of being ordered around by these odd guardians that they don't really connect with very well. Yeah, it's really strange, but so good. So that hit the spot in terms of middle grade that I was looking for. Then I did a reread. I reread Invisible Monsters by Chuck Palahniuk. And I feel complicated about this. I reread it, so it was a book I had read before and loved. And I think I loved it again. I think it was definitely a 5-star, just for the reaction, the processing that I did while reading this. So this book is very strange. We start at the very end of the story, really. We start with a woman in a mansion with 2 other women who are her best friends. And all of them are injured and the manor is burning down around them while one of them is in a wedding dress. So clearly it's a messy book. Like, this is just a mess, start to finish. So we start at the end and then we jump back and we hear this woman's story as she's coming up as a struggling model, gaining that one friendship, the one who is in the wedding dress, and them being models together, playing off of one another and striving forward in their careers. Then a tragedy, a trauma happens in the woman's life and she's disfigured. She winds up in this sort of long-term physical rehab, dealing with having lost part of her jaw, not being able to speak. And she befriends a trans woman there who is also going through rehab from plastic surgery, basically, from going through transition. And so there's this very intensive disfigurement versus beauty element. The female friendships are a really big piece, and it feels so complex. I will say that. It's definitely complex, and as I said, very messy. Okay, I had to wait out a cat wheel session quickly there. So what I really enjoy about this so much is that very much this is a mirror to Fight Club, Palahniuk's most popular novel probably, where that one is exploring the same topics that this book is through a lens of toxic masculinity, really. It's looking at a lot of things about us as people, as consumers, and being trapped within a certain system. And this is exploring the same things, but from a lens of toxic femininity and performative womanhood and the ways that society expects us to behave femininity in a certain way. And that's really interesting. And I like that it is so complicated and not very likable in general here. All of the characters are kind of hateable, really. They do things in very self-serving ways, but they're interesting characters. They're great characters, in fact. I think so much about this is complicated because of the world that it was written in. This is written at the end of the 90s, and I think if it were written today, this book probably couldn't exist, more or less. I would be very surprised. But even fitting in its time, that provides it more context, that's the added layers for me of being from this moment when sort of mental health was just becoming acceptable to talk about, and people were just sort of vomiting up all of this mental health stuff going on with them and trying to figure out how to process it. And that is happening here as well. And do I think that everything is handled perfectly? No, but I think that the aspect of it not being tidy is part of the charm of the book, or what's compelling about the book. There is this whole aspect where after her trauma, when she's recovered enough to go out, they're going to these open houses, really high-end open houses, and stealing medication routinely. Like, this is just what they're doing all the time, pretty much. And they get hold of like some estrogen or female hormones, and she starts secretly dosing a guy that's with them. And then he obviously begins having sort of outward physical and emotional effects that are very feminine, or perceived as feminine. And she's just sort of laughing about it. And she's doing this obviously not out of malice, but kind of out of boredom. And that's a pretty big thing that comes across here and in Fight Club, certainly. And I think that is also very, very of its time, where like MTV generation, I think it was an expression of that newness of a world with so much information all coming at us, and trying to figure out what to focus our attention on. And now we're struggling even more with that, but we're all constantly inundated even more. Yeah, so this was interesting. It made me think, even as a reread, there were aspects of this twists and turns to the story that I hadn't fully remembered, or I hadn't remembered how integral they were and how much they played into the commentary that this is making. So I really enjoyed this surprisingly messy novel. So that was a messy one. And then a not very messy and very delightful novel is Frederica by Georgette. My friend Shannon has been raving about Hayer's work for a very long time. So when I saw this on the shelf at the library, I was like, oh, I must pick that up. And now I've run down my time on the borrow, and so I absolutely had to get to it. And I kind of blazed through it, even though it's very long. It's over 400 pages. And this was just so charming in every way, really. The characters are so strong. The tone was not what I expected. It's really funny, in fact. So we're obviously following Frederica, but I would say even more perspective-wise, it feels we are closer to following Marquis Elverstoke. And Elverstoke is a bit of an enigmatic character. Like, he's extremely flamboyant and dresses really well. He has all these very multi-layered capes and stuff that everyone's always wowed by. So he's a really big character. And Frederica comes onto the scene as this far-flung cousin who may or may not actually be a cousin, but is certainly tangentially far removed related to him. And her father has died. She's a spinster at this point. She's in her mid-20s and is a spinster. So she is not looking for help herself, but she's been raising her younger siblings, and they need someone to provide the path to introduce them into the London society ton. And so she comes to Elverstoke seeking that help. so that he can endorse them, basically, because he is a man of society and very well respected, despite his being a really confirmed bachelor. He's unusual, for sure. Everyone seems to think he stands out. So her younger sister is the person that they would be bringing out into society to begin courting, potentially. She is quite the beauty. Well, in conflict to this, Alverstoke has also already agreed to endorse his own sister's children and bring them out into society. And his sister's daughter is very plain, but somewhat more well off, it seems. So Frederica's family don't seem to be very wealthy, but they're comfortable. So they're not like impoverished or anything. They're not up against needing to have a marriage immediately. So they're taking this very casually. But going from these people that Alverstoke doesn't even know to people who are in his regular life and constantly having scrapes and pulling him into those scrapes, it's such great fun. I thought that the romance was going to be a much bigger element to this, and it really isn't. It's much more a comedy of manners, I would say personally, or just plain historical fiction with a very, very slight romance. In fact, I would say, I know a lot of people really love the romance in Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. And I had heard so much about that going into that book that I thought that was going to be a really big part, and it is very not. It's barely there. But this has, I think, a similar vibe. It's also equally subtle and kind of in the background. And it feels similar in the way that it's providing this progression, like a growth of affection over time through non-romantic contextual interactions between them. Like them just getting to know each other turns into this growing affection. And that's really what the romance in Curse of Chalion feels like. So this is subtle, but less subtle than that. It's definitely present. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it being kind of a historical that does have that romantic element. It has the ton and the courting season aspects, but there wasn't really ever any overt romance. There wasn't any flirtation even, realistically. It was just two people sort of bonding over shared interests and thoughts, and I liked that aspect. But more so, it's the scrapes that they get into. That's what the book is really about. There are so many funny things that happen, and just the tone of this was so much more funny than I expected. There are multiple dog-related shenanigans in here that were great, not sad, funny. Yeah, it was a great time. Let me read this. So Alverstoke is dreading going out with one of the younger boys, Frederica's brothers. When Nap drew back the blinds in his master's bedroom upon the following morning, the Marquis was first revolted by the sight of brilliant sunshine, and then by his valet's announcement that it was a beautiful day. He had hoped for rain, gales, or even snow, anything in fact which would make a balloon ascension impossible. But a cloudless sky met his gaze, and when hope dying hard, he asked Nap if it was not very still and windless. Nap replied with all the air of one bearing good tidings, "Just a nice light breeze, my lord. What you might call a perfect June day." "You are mistaken," responded his lordship. "At what time does the damned balloon make its ascension?" "At 2 o'clock, my lord, according to what Master Felix told Wiccan," said Nap demurely. "And you may depend upon it," said his lordship, "that that brat will be upon the doorstep on the stroke of noon." But when he himself emerged from his dressing room at noon, he found that young Mr. Merivale had arrived some little time earlier. It's very funny. And I think maybe the only thing this had against it a bit is that I'm also reading Middlemarch recently, and at least the first chunk of that I read has a very similar tone in terms of the humor and wit, certainly. But this really has a much more modern feel to the writing, and it doesn't feel quite as of the time. And this was written much more modernly, so that's why. So I don't know how to kind of rank it. It makes it feel less of the time and place that it would have been written. But I think that's perfectly fine, and I had a grand time with it. So I'm actually thrilled to have finally read a Georgette Heyer, and Heyer has a very long backlist for me to read from. So I'm delighted to have finally tried Heyer as an author and get to some more, certainly in the future. So that is, I think, everything that I read this week. What I'm reading currently, I picked up Vicious by V.E. Schwab for my in-person book club, and I also finally got into Drop of Corruption. Yay. I've not had as much time as I would like, but now that I'm finished with Frederica, this will be all steam ahead. So that is it for books as far as watching stuff. I think I've still been very scattered, but I finished up the interim season of Jet Lag, the game, 13.5. This is sort of a travel game, and in this particular season, there are 2 teams of 2 who are, as it says, one team of seekers and one team of hiders in New York. They have kind of challenges or curses that they can play on each other and different means of going after one another through the entire city. So it was a good time, and to make it 4, usually there are 3 guys who are the regular cast of the show, more or less, and then sometimes they have guests. So this one, because it was kind of a mid-season and only 2 episodes, they had another member of the staff, Amy, come on, and she was tangential in the previous season in that she wrote some of the challenges but was not an actual player. Now she was an actual player, and she was really perfect for it. She fit in great. Obviously she works with them, so that is a good thing. But I would definitely love to see her back. She had an awesome vibe that fit very well with the teams. I love the show, so it was a good time for sure to watch. But I'm addicted to this show somewhat. So now that everything's all caught up and I don't have more season to watch, it is so hard to wait for new seasons. So I can't wait for season 14 to come out sometime soon. I think that's it for reading and watching. My life has been very busy. It's been a lot, a good lot, I think. I went out earlier this week to 2 events. So the first one was Coco Peru, a drag show. She's kind of an older queen who has had a lot of life experience and was able to regale us with these great anecdotes of like meeting Barbara Streisand and Liza Minnelli, all the cool stuff that she's experienced. And so much hope and joy was infused in that. There were many inspirational moments and stories that she told, and that was great. I loved that tone. Also an excellent singer, so there were some musical numbers, and it was just a very joyful experience to be in the crowd for that. And not at a huge venue, so that was kind of nice. It was a smaller, more intimate thing. So it was a great event. And then I also went out to the final week of the Lantern Festival at my zoo, and that was fabulous. Really, really good. It was our 2nd year doing it, and I was a little worried it was going to rain, but the rain passed us by, and it was so cool. Like, very extravagant lights. And I had been last year, and last year was good, but this year was even bigger. So that was super fun. Really unique experience to have at the zoo, I think. So I did those things in terms of going out. In terms of staying in, I finally succeeded at getting a laptop. A couple weeks ago, I regaled you with my foibles of dealing with Dell and failing to get a laptop. So I got an Acer Nitro, and so far so good. I haven't gotten the chance to really use it very much, but I am trying to replace my PC with a laptop, and so far it seems like it's going to be able to do everything that I need. I've been just getting the basics set up. I've got, I think, most of the applications that I really will want to use installed. I've updated all of that stuff. It's such a rigmarole to get through anymore. And like half of the setup, the OS setup when you start it up first, because everything has been so like easy-fied now, it takes about as long just to get through denying all of the like marketing and AI options as it used to take switching out disks to install the actual OS back in the day. So it was a little annoying to do that setup, because none of it was really like setup. It was all telling it not to spam me, more or less. So I did all of that, and it has been really nice, actually. I haven't, as I said, got a chance to really use it, but just in setting up stuff and trying out things to make sure that things were working. Like I got to sit in my nice comfy chair and play some Ticket to Ride for a little bit, just to test out and make sure that Steam and games were working, because that is something I will want to use it for. Yeah, so that was nice to not have to go sit at my computer desk and stuff just for a low-key game. So I'm gonna do that some more now that I have a laptop that can move around. I have not, however, set up the docking station. So I have a docking station for my work stuff upstairs, but downstairs is my personal space away from work office. And so I'm gonna have to set up a docking station down there now that I'm moving from a PC. So it'll be my next project, but I'm not in any terrible rush. Timing did happen kind of perfectly because just in the past couple weeks, Steam has started crashing a lot when it tries to load on my PC. So I knew I very much needed to get it replaced. I think I probably have bored you to death talking too much about that, but other than that, just busy with work mostly is it. But I mean, I'm busy a lot. I feel like I've been doing a lot lately, and that's exciting, and I'm feeling good, and that's great, mostly all positive. So onward to recommendations for this week. I have two for you. The first is from Melinda at A Web of Stories, titled Buddy Reads 101. So if you have been curious about buddy reads, or if you haven't done a buddy read before and are interested in them, this kind of lays out what you can expect from buddy reading when booktubers are talking about that. What are the types of ways that we approach that usually? And obviously more ways can exist out there than what she covered, but she makes it accessible if you don't know about buddy reads. And then the other one is 22 Greatest Ideas I've Ever Found from Mindshift. So Mindshift is AKA Brandon. Brandon used to have a booktube channel called Brandon's Bookshelf. And then he started verging more and more into sort of skepticism and religious critique and started a separate channel, Mindshift, and his original booktube channel kind of died off. But this one is focused entirely on a list of books that really exposed him to new ideas that have sort of formed his ideology. And I loved hearing that. So this is some very heavy, weighty, sorry, cat, wait, it happens way too often here. So this is a video that is full of books that contain really heavy, weighty ideas that you could check out. So that is my recommendations for the week, and I think that's the catch up done. Thank goodness. So I'm off to enjoy the rest of my weekend that remains, and with that I will say I hope you have a wonderful week in reading and in life, and thank you so very much for watching.